everybody. Welcome to the Wisdom Podcast. I am your host, Sierra. And as always, I just want to let you guys know my intention for this podcast. I pray that I can reach just one person. And if I do, that is more than enough for me to help you know that you're not alone, that there's someone else who's been in your situation and they want to share their guidance and their light and their knowledge on all that they've been through. So hopefully we can help you through that as well. And today we have the lovely Miss Lauren to share her story and help us and give all of us her light and knowledge. So without further ado, Miss Lauren, please introduce yourself to the world.
Hi, Sierra. Thank you so much for having me. When I submitted my story to you, I actually was looking up your podcast and just what your vision is, and that really aligns with me. If it could just help one person, when we go through things like heartbreak, trauma, any of it, and if we tell our story, it can help one person. I just love your vision. So
Thank you so
again
much.
for having
Thank
me.
you.
So a little bit about me. I'm actually a licensed therapist in the state of Virginia. I've worked in a variety of settings throughout the years, school settings. I currently work inpatient psych unit, and I also do outpatient therapy as well. So that's what I do. I'm very passionate about the performing arts, metaphor, storytelling, and I incorporate that a lot in my practice. And so what I've been doing is I had a very recent heartbreak this past April, and I decided to tell this story in hopes to help other people and to let people know that this can happen to anyone, no matter what profession you are, class, anything.
So tell us, before we get into the heartbreak, what made you get into therapy?
Oh, yeah, that's a lengthy one. So I always knew that I was really good with talking to people and relating to people. I was always, like in high school, the one people would come to for problems, and I was always just very much out there too. I was always described as an old soul.
Same.
See, I knew it. That's why we're connecting.
Absolutely.
When I was in high school, I did enjoy things like, I'm showing my age here, boy bands and things, Backstreet Boys, all that. But I also have always loved like old movies and philosophy and just dialogue. That's always been a passion of mine. So I think that's where it stems from for sure.
For sure. Now, I think it's interesting because I also was that one friend for everyone that they could come to for problems. Did you find yourself often taking on much too, like, especially at a young age, like taking on everyone's problems and not really dealing with your own? Or were you able to balance it? Because I had a little bit of an issue with balancing. I didn't set the boundaries properly, if that makes sense.
Full transparency, I am still just now learning how to set boundaries with that.
Yeah.
Which is what led me into this past relationship with essentially a covert narcissist. And I'll get into more of that later on.
Wait.
But yeah, yes, absolutely. And again, that's something that I'm still actively working towards, because it's very easy to put on that mask and just, I'm very good with other people and very good about helping people navigate their issues and whatever they're going through in their life. But then it took something like this to say, wow, I have poor boundaries myself. I definitely identify as a recovering people pleaser. And
absolutely. Me too.
Being too nice. That is such a thing as being too nice. And so the balance, absolutely, I did not have any. And this is why I'm just putting myself out there more and just sharing with people that, you do need to have that balance, those boundaries, and that self-love.
Okay. So how long was the relationship that you were in that led to this heartbreak?
And so it was on and off again for essentially almost 6 years. It was a long distance thing. And if you see in my blog, I am writing a whole blog about just the story and the beginning, and me analyzing it from my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
just about red flags that I should have seen but I did not.
Yeah.
And definitely the whole point of this is not to blast him. I won't even say his name. I don't
Yeah.
want to say him ever again. Um, it's very much to examine how did this situation happen to me. So on
Yeah.
and off again, about 6 years, he was always very much I mean, he even used the word commitment phobe.
Mm.
And so getting back to being that people pleaser, I just was very much just, oh, well, he'll change
Mm.
and all that. So there was a period of time that we didn't talk when I finally said, okay, enough. But he came back into my life in 2021,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, and basically told me everything I wanted to hear of
Right. Right.
I was an idiot, and I should have seen you for who you were. And so, of course, that sounded really good to me, and I allowed him back in my life, introduced him
Mm-hmm.
to my family,
At this time,
everything.
okay, I was like, was it in
Mm-hmm.
person at this point or was it still
Yes,
long distance?
yes,
Okay, okay.
very, very, very much so. And we were getting closer and closer and closer, and then
Okay.
it was all of a sudden he was into commitment. And
Wow.
looking back on that, I instead of hearing the words, I should have
Mm.
looked at actions. I should have said,
Absolutely. Yeah.
well, what changed? Like, what? Why all of a sudden? Um,
Mm.
and then essentially, when things got realistic and rough, you know, we were having some difficult times with communication, but I was always
Yeah.
willing to work on things. He essentially devalued me and discarded me. Yeah, so what a discard is for people who are not familiar with narcissistic relationships, a discard is basically just being tossed like trash. You're no
Yeah.
longer of use to that person. Therefore, well, I guess in my mind, well, Lauren's being way too difficult and she's going through too
Mm.
much. So that's just it. I'm just not gonna do it anymore.
Like it's no pressure to do that or anything. Like we haven't had
Lack,
time in this
yeah,
relationship. So you said
lack of
something really
empathy.
right. You said
Hmm.
something really interesting about the red flags that you picked up on and we ignore it. And I think it's interesting, especially like the type of profession that you're in or that some people can be in, that we're kind of very vocal about working people through these processes, that when we're in it, we can almost be blind to it ourselves.
Yep.
um, and I think what you're saying about how you tell your story, it's not to bash him, but a lot of times that's how we heal is by telling our story. Because when we don't speak it, when we just think that we have to be quiet about the situation, that's when that wound becomes infected because it's like suffocated versus like let's let the air in and heal this a little bit. And that's how we do it. If I have to tell my story because I've been hurt and this is how I heal, I'm going to do it. And that doesn't mean I'm trying to get at him. I'm trying to get back with me, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, and that's when I knew, because well, interesting when we went through the rough patch before, I was not in a good place
Mm,
when the first time he discarded me and just said, okay, we're not compatible. I was very angry, and yeah, I absolutely was not being the best version of myself. I just was
mm,
very like, oh, I just want to get revenge on you, and da, da. I
yeah.
mean, terrible. That's not me at all. And so with this time, it really has forced me to get back to myself, which is an amazing feeling, but it's definitely been a process
A
for sure.
journey. Right.
Yeah.
So
And
you
it's still
mentioned.
ongoing.
Yeah, oh, it's always going to be. One of someone that I said, and it's funny because she's actually a coach for recovering people pleasers. It was an absolutely beautiful conversation. Her name is Melissa, and she was saying that thing is people always say, I'm healed," and there's never healed. We're always healing from something because we always are growing. And sometimes it may trigger us. And because we are people pleasers or we are givers, naturally, that's what we want to do, is be there for people. And we love extra, 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 extra hard. So it's like,
Yes.
how do I cut off that limit, or how do we put boundaries into unconditional love to let them know that I still have to protect myself in this? But you mentioned something in your blog about Peter Pan syndrome and Wendy syndrome. Can we
Yes.
talk about that? Because that has totally piqued my interest. What does that mean?
So I, essentially, it was a term that I only just recently found out about. It is a term in pop psychology. Now, this is not an official
Mm,
diagnosis or anything, but
mm,
it was a term coined by Dr. Dan Kiley in the 1980s, and I feel like it needs to be brought back to describe
yeah.
these types of relationships. So, Peter Pan syndrome, I can kind of just give you some bullet points. It was initially meant to describe men, but it can also apply to women. So, some characteristics of Peter Pan syndrome, which is basically narcissist light. They're not necessarily
Mm,
outwardly abusive, that sort of thing, but they are on that spectrum.
yeah.
So they have difficulty with responsibilities and commitment, issues with work and career interests. They're very self-centered, but they're also reliant on others. The biggest
Wow.
thing is avoidance of criticism because their ego is so fragile.
Okay.
Difficulty controlling impulsive behaviors. You will find a lot of these people are very much, now again, I'm not here to shame people who are into things like poker or any,
Hmm.
yeah, that's fun here and there, but they tend to be really
Yeah,
into things
really
like
in it.
that.
Yeah, really in it.
Yes, instant gratification, instant, and that's all it is.
Oh, wow.
And in my case, avoidance of responsibility and accountability, especially during conflict resolution attempts.
Mm,
They avoid conflict resolution at all costs because it's essentially adult stuff.
yeah. Yeah.
No one likes conflict, but for example, what he would say to me is just, well, I just don't want drama. I don't want drama. And I'm looking back on that. I said, well, wait a minute. I don't either, but we're having a disagreement. Let's
Right.
talk about it like adults. But again, with him, if it wasn't fun and games all the time, doesn't want any of it.
Mm,
Um, and also, too, this is according to Dr. Dan Kiley, men with Peter Pan syndrome, they have difficulty with maternal relationships, and they
wow.
almost treat romantic partners as almost like mother figures. Like they essentially want you to almost be a mother in a way. And
Yeah.
it's very dark and creepy, I know.
No,
um,
I understand that. Yeah.
and so the Wendy syndrome, unfortunately, when it gets into this unhealthy dynamic, and so I will say I'm a recovering Wendy, the people pleaser.
Yeah.
They think of love as sacrifice and resignation. It's just I'm going to do anything. I'm going to just pour and pour and pour and give everything I
Hmm.
can until there's nothing left.
Right.
And they almost assume a motherly figure with this partner just so they can have that love.
Hmm.
They try to avoid upsetting others. Very anxious attachment and codependent um, tendencies,
Hmm.
and they want to feel just essential. And the biggest one for me, and that's what I think what we're kind of getting at, is Wendy syndrome, is feeling the need to care for and protect others at the expense
Wow.
of their own mental health
Oh,
and well-being.
yeah. And that I agree. That is the big one because we do very often, and I think it really comes like a lot of people feel, but when you're empathic and you're a giver, and when you, um, I think all your life, we, I think we, for some reason, if I'm speaking for myself, I know from being like a childhood, there's certain areas where I knew that I craved a deeper love,
Mm-hmm.
and I would work extra hard for that love. And that carried on when I started to grow up and become more intimate in relationships, where I would see myself putting in so much and getting so little.
Yes.
But because I was able to feel loved, I took it. And that
Yeah.
was something that I didn't understand why I was doing that. It was kind of just like, okay, Sierra, let's sit with yourself because you're not getting anything in return out of this, but
Right.
you're
You're getting crumbs. Well, and this is actually a term in psychology too. From like narcissism, you get breadcrumbs. You get little crumbs. They
mm,
throw out the love here and there, just a little bit,
just a little bit.
but they don't want to give you the whole cake. So it,
Wow.
yeah,
Enough to keep
and
you not too hungry to leave. But yeah.
cor- correct,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And like for his case, I mean, he very much was. He was talking about, oh yeah, we definitely want to get married. And I just want to build a future
Wow.
together, and that's very much telling me all the stuff I wanted to hear. But there is such a thing called future faking.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if that was just to keep me hooked just enough because again, I see a little bit of action here and there with him
Yeah.
doing that, but like for example, the last time he was here, I said, well, when you're on this trip this time, I really want to make it a priority to go look at this house, like to see a friend of mine's
Hmm.
house, to see what kind of house that we could afford and all that. Somehow that never got done. It was always, well, I don't want to give
Yeah.
his sport. I don't want to say too much about his sport. We'll just call it pool. It was
Hmm.
always going to play pool. It was always that.
Okay.
Anytime anything practical would get brought up, I'm sure he was thinking I'm just not fun and I'm just being too controlling, too anxious, all that. And to be honest, there were times I was very like anxious and controlling, and I think that I developed that because I was accepting crumbs. I was
Yeah.
accepting because I was just like, please, just can we? Yeah, almost
Yeah.
begging, and it's not a good feeling.
Right. And that I do think that anxiety and all of that stems from that nervous system like when our brain is like, hey, something's not, we know that we're avoiding the red flag.
Yeah,
And because yeah, because we're so invested now, we're just gonna keep ignoring it, but our body is fighting. Like our body is like literally, I think our brain doesn't let go of that survival tactic where it's like, hey, I'm trying to let you know what's really going on. You shouldn't feel all of the anxiety. And that doesn't mean that healthy relationships don't have ups and downs,
right.
but it shouldn't always be this. Because I found myself sometimes ignoring those red flags and then ending up in situations where I felt like I was about to throw up because I was so anxious. Like you're just like on the edge of the bed, curled up in a ball, like, what is life? What is
Yeah,
happening? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, just basically, I think like the evening it all fell apart is when we we were staying up really really late, and the plan was like, well, hey, let's go to this person's house, and again, we'll call it pool. We'll play pool, but
Mhm.
you know, I we have something to do the next day, and can we just make sure that
Mhm.
we're mindful about leaving or going to bed whenever? But of course, 4 a.m. rolls around, and me, being the people pleaser at the time, I wasn't just going to go to bed because I wanted to support him with playing
Yeah.
pool and
Yeah.
root him and all that. But he immediately weaponized that and turned that on me, saying, "Well, you can go to bed at any time." I said,
Mhm.
I can, but that's not the point. I thought we were just be a
Yeah, yeah,
partner. So
yeah.
I thought we were agreeing because to me it just felt unfair. It's like, well, that's just nice. So tomorrow morning when you're with my friends or our event, then you're going to be like hungover and, excuse my language, half-assed. And
Yeah.
I was getting angry at that.
Mhm.
So, but of course, looking back on it, I definitely would have been like, do whatever you want to do. But yeah,
So
and then
what is it that you think makes us ignore the red flags?
I think, well, loneliness and just
Okay.
wanting to have that love because we
Companionship.
all want
Mhm.
that. Yeah, I think we all want that. And I was saying this in a recent podcast that I went on about like how embracing loneliness is so hard to do, but
Mhm.
you have to do it in order to recognize, hey, I'm not going to settle because
Yeah.
it doesn't feel good to be lonely because yeah, I do. I don't miss him, but I miss the idea of him for sure. And I think what
Yeah.
happens is we get we get lonely sometimes, and then that just we start
We
pushing away all the red
romanticize it.
flags.
Yeah, we
Ex-
romanticize it.
right,
Mhm.
right, exactly. Like we're all, and I was saying this on another podcast too. It's basically ingrained in our brains. I think as women, just that whole idea of a fairy tale and Prince Charming. I just think that's a subconscious thing
Yeah.
we're still working to undo.
Yeah, I agree. And so once the heartbreak happens, you said this was in April.
Yeah.
How was the healing process for you?
Oh,
Like, and
oh.
I know that you're still probably in it.
Yeah, yeah.
How was that for you?
Well, so I will say that just like with even a normal breakup, I experienced all the emotions of just like anger,
Grieving.
hurt,
Mhm.
not, I mean, the first few weeks, you just feel like you feel like a zombie. It's just like, what just
Mm.
happened? But with this breakup, see, a discard is different from a regular breakup. Like I was completely blindsided by this. Like, just
Right.
okay, you're done. So when you're discarded, yeah, I experienced all the things, like just loss of appetite, all that. So I did have to get some additional help just for myself, like in the
Okay.
form of like antidepressants and just my own therapy, which I'm so glad I did.
Yeah.
But but I really reconnected with friends, and I actually was able to go do a show right after the heartbreak happened. So that was
Okay.
cool. But I knew I needed to really sit and process this
Yeah.
eventually, and that's where, and it doesn't feel good.
Yep.
It sucks that you have to sit and self-reflect sometimes. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel good. But when I started doing that, slowly, I started saying, oh, well, I am a worthy person, and I do have a lot to
Hmm.
offer, and I, yeah, you lose that with
Yeah.
yourself
Absolutely.
when you're in a relationship like that.
Hmm.
Again, I'm definitely still in the healing process. I do have days where I just feel blah, but
Absolutely.
I'm finding that I'm taking less as needed anxiety medication. I just feel a lot.
Hey.
I don't know. My body is just doing a lot better.
Right. And I think something that I realized is that because I remember one of my really big heartbreaks, and I had, like you said, the biggest thing for me to heal was to sit with myself. It wasn't dating someone else.
No.
It was literally sitting with me and realizing not only what they did, but what I did. Like, Sierra,
Yeah.
why were you reacting this way to this? Why did you accept this when you knew down to your core it's not what you wanted? Why did you, and when you get to that, the root of that, I think that's when we're able to start setting those boundaries, because we now know what our true self desires. Um,
Right.
because like we said, we romanticize these relationships, and it is, if I'm talking for myself, it is easier for me to play victim than for me to also see that, okay, Sierra, you weren't perfect either. You probably
Right.
hurt him in a certain amount of ways based off of you trying to protect yourself. um, and that's just the honest truth. We're not
Yeah.
always, there's no one person that's 110% at fault, but I do know how the situation like plays out, you know. I'm like, okay, I'm
Right.
not saying I'm perfect, but I'm not saying I was, if I'm being
Yeah.
real.
No, for sure. And that's where I didn't want to face. It was so much easier for me just to be angry at him. Now, again, I did not deserve to be
Absolutely.
treated like
No.
that. So I definitely don't want to, like, victim blame. But at some point, if you are a victim, well, I don't know, I don't really like that word. I'll just say if you are a survivor of this, at some
Mm,
point, and this is where it gets really hard. It's like, why did I allow this to happen? What is not wrong with me, but what do I need to examine and work on with myself that I allowed this to happen?
yeah,
That I had to ask myself, how did I get into this Peter Pan and Wendy syndrome dynamic?
absolutely.
So, and I couldn't just blame him. So,
No, I agree with that. I love that. So now you're healing. How are you today?
uh, just it's really interesting. Like when you go through something like that, you start finding joy in so many things that you almost
Mm.
forgot about. Like when
Ooh,
I was a kid, I used to get excited for holidays, like really excited because I love it. I love
yeah,
celebrating. I love
yeah,
family time, friend time, and yeah, and I feel like that's getting more enhanced this year. It's getting more like, wow, I'm really excited for Halloween. I'm in a haunted forest, and then Thanksgiving, Christmas, like I'm getting more excited about those things
excited.
again. Um,
Yeah,
and of course, there are days where I feel low, and I just have to recognize that. I'm just not having a good day today, and I just need to
and
be
that's
alone,
okay.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
or I need to be with a friend today, or I need to go see my sister today. Just you just
yeah.
have to like recognize what you need.
I think that's huge, and especially when you say I'm not having a good day, because a lot of us are hard on ourselves when we feel like, okay, I should be so much further than this. But if we
Yes,
count the good days versus the days where we're down and crying, we are doing so much better. So give yourself grace and be gentle, because you're already dealing with heartbreak. Your heart doesn't need you to pound it 10 times harder. Like, just love on yourself and give yourself the love that you wanted that person to give you, or that you want the next person to give you. So when it comes along, hopefully it's more so like the overflow rather than
yeah,
the, so that's how
right,
I feel about it.
exactly. Oh yeah, exactly. Like the little crumbs that I was accepting. Yeah,
Yeah, you about to get the
absolutely.
whole cake, sis.
Yes, I will not settle for anything else than the whole
Absolutely.
cake.
You
And
deserve it.
yeah, yeah. Well, so do you. I mean, I think a lot of people really just, and that's my goal with this, is to have people look within themselves. Don't settle just
Hmm.
because you're lonely. Loneliness doesn't feel good, but also embrace it.
Yeah.
Sometimes loneliness is not a bad thing,
Thank
but
you for
but
saying that. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Where did I think I saw a skit. I think it was a Tyler Perry skit, and um I, when you go through stuff like this, you find all this stuff on Instagram.
Yeah.
I think it has
Yeah.
algorithms where it sends you all this stuff.
The FBI agent is hearing
Yeah,
what you're going through.
right, exactly. Sure. In that case, I'll thank the FBI agent. But yeah, when Tyler Perry was dressed as Medea, and she says
Hmm.
like something that I've been carrying that. She's like, honestly, I'd rather be in a corner by myself with a puppy and a goldfish as opposed to
Mm.
being with someone who does not give me what I deserve and the love I
Yeah.
deserve. And that's true.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people need to start putting the worth they put on everyone else to themselves. Like,
Yes.
I am worth every piece of effort that I've given this person to. Like, and it's easy because we're so mean to ourselves versus how we are so kind to others. And I feel like if the world just like had an opposite day for one day and we gave to ourselves what we gave to the entire world, we'd be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, this is so much better. Life is so much the quality of my life is so much better because I feel like I am content without all the extra. Like I'm happy, I'm good, and I'm full with just who I am. So I
Mhm.
love that. Yeah, Medea be spitting some truth.
Yes. No.
Medea is
Very
like,
much so.
yeah, I
Well, and
can do
also
that
too.
all by myself. I don't need to tag you along with me.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's another thing too. Like you have to find yourself looking at how your behaviors are when you're with a
Hmm.
person like that. And because all of a sudden I found myself, it's like, gosh, I'm being toxic now. This particular
Wow.
this particular guy was again, I'm not gonna go into all the details, but he was involved in a civil lawsuit with like an ex-friend, like business
Hmm.
partner. And he was very much like, well, help me, babe, help me. You got such great skills and you're into
Mm.
psychology. How do I get back at him? And of course, being in love and people pleaser, I'm like, oh yeah, let's go, let's get it. And then, you look back at that and it's just, wow, I don't like being
That
like that.
wasn't me. Yeah.
I don't
Hmm.
like, I mean, trust me, I definitely admire strong women. I mean, there's a reason why I love Sharon Stone and Basic Instinct. Trust me. I mean, we
Hmm.
all have that side of ourselves, but it was just getting so rotten in a way. It was just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
wow, I want to be relaxed. I don't want to be doing all this.
Yeah, always on defense and always
Right.
on, yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree. Wow. So is there anything else regarding like therapy or the relationship or the Peter Pan syndrome that you love to talk about when telling your story?
The main thing is just recognizing that it is okay to ask for help and it's okay
Mm.
to say the words I'm not okay, even if you're a professional therapist. Because when you see, if you read my blog, the first words I say are the words shame and hypocrite.
Mhm.
Because a lot of it, I was putting a lot of shame on myself. It's like, what the heck, Lauren? You
Right.
have all the answers, you have all the tools. Why didn't you see through this? And then the hypocrite part is just I'm telling all these people to love themselves all the
Mm.
time in my inpatient and outpatient, but it's like, wow, I really was not doing that for
Yeah.
myself. So I think I would just say to people, like, just there's no shame in asking for help and saying that you're
Mm.
not okay, because the only way um, over it is through it. There's no,
It's through it. Yeah.
and again, even if you have to do things like see a psychiatrist for like antidepressants, the point of that is not to numb how you're feeling. We don't want any
Mhm.
zombies. But sometimes it's okay to say, hey, I just might need this little extra tool and piece just to help me
Yeah.
process and get through things. There's absolutely no shame in that.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. Well, Lauren, I want to say to you, thank you for telling your story. through all the feelings that you may have felt with the toxicity, if it was shame, if it was any of that, you are strong. And to tell your story so beautifully um, shows your strength, you know. And I do think that there's a lot of people who deal with narcissistic relationships. And it's hard
Hmm.
to speak on because you don't really know you're with a narcissist until it's a little too late.
Right.
And now you're like an avalanche of just rolling. So to hear someone who has been in it and who has wisdom and she's growing from it, I'm sure you're going to help, whether it's male or female, because it's not always a man that's a narcissist. It
Right.
can be females, absolutely. So I do think the story that you have for us today, the reason that you went through this story is so that you have a story to share, to reach people from all across the world. And I do believe that you'll be doing that. So I want to say thank you for coming onto the Wisdom Podcast and sharing your wisdom on this topic. Um, and if there's anything at all that we can do to read your blogs, to follow you on social media. So if we need help or someone that can reach out to you because they're in a
Yeah.
narcissistic relationship, please put yourself on the map, brag about yourself, tell us it all.
Yeah, well, Sierra, thank you so much for having me. I just love your platform and your podcast. Like, you just radiate compassion, and I just think the
Thank you.
world needs more of that, and we need more services like this. We need more streaming services such as this, just in general.
Wow.
Yeah. So my blog, I do have a website blog. It's well, I don't have it memorized. So it's well, I guess you can start off just Instagram is where I mainly do a lot of stuff. So my
Okay.
Instagram, it's Lauren, Lauren, then it's underscore wiki wiki, WICKY, and that's where you'll find the link to my blog there.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, Lauren wiki wiki. If you search for me, that you should be able to find all that.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, you guys have heard her story. She has shared her wisdom. Please make sure that you go follow her. If you need help, reach out. If it's not to us, reach out to someone because you deserve the life that you want. You are worth it. And don't ever settle. Just like we've been saying, we see the red flags, and sometimes it's really hard to get out of these situations and these relationships, especially when our heart is so involved. But the heart can sometimes be deceiving. So just get the help that you need if you need it, and know that you're not alone. So thank you once again, Lauren, and thank you to our audience. This is the Wisdom Podcast, and we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Hi, thank you.